Professor Ike, thank you for joining GMRG in this round of interview and scheduling the time for us.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with you, Swati.
Perfect.
Okay,
So,
thank
sir,
you.
Professor Ike, what I would like to start asking you is that what is the value of joining GMRG as a researcher? So, could you just take us as to when did you join GMRG and your journey with GMRG?
Yeah, I can't really put a time, a year date on it, but I believe I used the very first version of the GMRG, GMRG 1. I came on board after the instrument has been developed, and the value that I find in the GMRG is the ability to actually collect actual data from companies, be able to speak with companies directly to seek their pulses in terms of the way they manage their manufacturing organization. That was an attraction for me. And at the time, I was doing some research in Nigeria, which is a country where I come from. And I was there with Lagos Business School, and I have a very good friend of mine then by the name Professor Albert Alos, who is the president of the school, and Albert happens to be in the manufacturing as well. So both of us kind of had a bond in terms of manufacturing processes. So we both actually engaged in that very first GMRG data collection process, where we went to different companies and collected data, analyzed the data, and we were able to do a post-analysis where we brought companies back to the Lagos Business School and shared the results of that particular data collection session. So that's really the attraction for me, and that is the fact that you can actually have that interaction with companies and try to offer them some guidance or guidelines on how to better manage their manufacturing processes. So this was where I can't even think it must be in the I'm ventured to say in the late 90s that we started that project, and I've been with GMRG ever since then.
That's wonderful. That's a wonderful journey. So, how has the survey results added to the research paper? So in terms of as we spoke about the quality of data, you said you had the opportunity to work in Nigeria for collection of data. So how, now that was as a data collector, now as a researcher, when you had to use the research for your publication, how was the quality, the access to the GMRG database, identification of the issues, that were relevant to your publication? How was your experience, and what do you think what sets GMRG apart from other data collecting agencies?
Like I said, the fact that the GMRG data is coming directly from the companies themselves is actually a value added. It's something that it has is a very a special feature of the GMRG. So that's one. Two, now in terms of the research activities, obviously, like I mentioned, when we did this first, we were not so much, we were thinking about research, but also more importantly, we're looking at how we might be able to provide some guidelines to manufacturers on how to better manage their organization. Lagos Business School is highly, at that time was highly, practice-based. They tried to provide practitioners best practices. So our goal at that time was to try to collect this information and then disseminate the information to the practitioners so that they can learn how to better manage their manufacturing processes. So that kind of evolved into research. We did, do some research with the data where we were able to publish some of those researches, both at the conference proceedings and more recently we had some publications. The in terms of the experience publishing out of the GMRG data, I think it's been a pleasant experience. And I know we have gone through the 5 phases of the GMRG and currently working on the 6th version of the GMRG. And I believe the GMRG 5, my sense is that the GMRG 5 may have had less number of published papers than the previous. That's I don't have any record to back that up, but based on my view, view of the literature, it looks like the GMRG 5 of all the GMRGs has the least number of published papers. And we're trying to address those issues in the GMRG 6 now to try to see how we can get more research published out of the data collection process. And hopefully we'll be able to accomplish that goal.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful, sir. We shall be doing that. The efforts are being taken for GMRG 6, and people like you who are who are always so engaged and induced in making it a success. I'm sure it will be a success this time.
Well, thank you.
My question now would be for value of corporate. So when you're approaching companies for GMRG data collection, right? So what motivates the companies to share? So we spoke about the issues that they're facing. So when we are collecting the data from the companies to address relevant issues, do you also see companies collaborate with us collaborate with us in terms of there are particular issues that the companies are facing apart from what we are trying to address? So do they also come back and tell us that what you're doing is we are going to cooperate with you, but at the same time, we also want you to address a few of the questions in this process? Would you help us in doing that? Do you have you encountered such instances where the companies have approached you for this collaborative effort?
Yeah, most of the time, obviously it takes time to engage some of these companies to participate in the research, but you have to essentially sell the instrument to them in terms of the value added. What is there for them, what gains, what benefit should they get from the study. And once you are able to convey that to them, they're more likely to take the time to conduct complete the survey. It's really time consuming. I mean, it's not something they can do in 10 minutes or less. They have to give it their time and on their thoughts to be able to address those questions. So most of the companies we've approached, for those that are willing to complete the survey, have always been very cooperative and willing to share the information freely. Now, some companies may, for confidentiality reasons, may decide they may not want to participate in the survey. But usually that's more of a minority in terms of the number of companies that would want to go with the survey. Now, in terms of whether they wanted to add to the questions, maybe address more issues. Yeah, I've had that experience with the companies, particularly doing study in Africa, in Nigeria. Some of the challenges are different, a whole lot different from what we experience in the developed world. And oftentimes they may want to see those challenges included in the survey. And we've tried to have a more kind of a subjective capture of those views, because I mean the GMRG survey is a very standard survey, and to really make much deviation from that, may not be instantly possible, but you can actually have a section where you can collect those thoughts that have been expressed during the collection process. So that's how we've gone through that.
So once the data is collected from the companies and once we have found out the results, do the companies expect you to go for you to come back to them and explain the results of the survey, or have we taken efforts to go back to them and talk about what we have analyzed from the survey data that we've collected, and what are the results and what patterns that we see, and how can we help them mitigate the risk in improving their supply chain, manufacturing supply chains?
Yeah, I have not done, in my past, I guess, before the GMRG 6, I've looked at the core survey for the GMRG. I've not looked at the supply chain or the other modules. But in terms of the core, we normally have a question at the end of the survey asking who would like to get a summary of the results. And for those companies that indicate that they would like to get a summary of the result, we have actually gone back and shared those results with the companies. But that's the much that we've done in terms of the core. Now, the folks that did the supply chain may have done something differently, where they have a more direct, continuous contact with the companies. But for the core, we normally have a question at the end of the survey and said, if you would like to get results of the study, please give us your information so we can mail those out to you. And for those that indicated that they would, we've always done that. And I would say about 90% of the companies would like to get some kind of a report sent back to them.
So when we send the reports back to them, is it explained to them in very simple terms? Because a lot of times we see the research papers are more for the academic world. They're not for the corporate world or for the non-academic world. So have we any instances, where the companies would want us to explain and maybe have a corporate session with them explaining the results, and they could use the knowledge of the researcher involved in the study in terms of solving the current issues at their factory?
Yeah, the results, that's a good point. Definitely, we don't want to send them research papers because they may not make a whole much sense out of that. But what we try to do, give them a summary report of the survey. Some of the major categories, like their competitive capabilities, we can tell them, here are, ways companies have looked at their competitive capabilities, or even their priorities, or maybe the amount of investment that are going to the different companies. Just something that will give them a view of probably the direction of the industry as a whole. So this is an aggregate data, so it doesn't really compare them with anyone else, but something that they can look at and get a sense of the trend of the industry, or some of the key aspect of the industry that they may have to look at. Okay. Particularly in the area of competitive positions. I think that's an interest area. They want to see what are some of those competitive factors that they need to pay attention to.
Right. And then do companies approach the researchers in terms of once the survey is done, once we've explained them the results, once we've had that entire co-sharing of data that we collected, after that, have we experienced as a research group that companies are happy with the kind of initiatives that we are taking and they want us to come back every year, or on specific instances or specific corporate involvements or assignments that they want to use our expertise? Have you experienced anything of that sort?
No, back in with the study we've done in Nigeria, like I said, Lagos Business School was the institution that we used to conduct the study, and Lagos Business School offers executive training to business managers across, the country and even beyond. So when they do come back to Lagos Business School for whatever course, we try to, share some of those results to them during that period. But they don't actively, seek out for those result necessarily, other than the summary that we sent to them for those that indicated they want the summary. The other way that we try to impact on the result is when they come back to their various executive training at Lagos Business School, then we normally have a way to show them some of the results and share that with them.
Right. So, Professor, we'll take a break here. It's 10:58. I believe you have a commitment for 11 o'clock.
11 o'clock. No, it's 9:58 now. So we are 1 hour.
Oh, still have an hour. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I'm just looking at
yeah, it's 9:58 now. So I still have an hour to go. But I have to leave a little bit earlier too.
Okay, sir. Okay, perfect. The other question would be, as a researcher, when your study has been published, what has your experience been post the publication? So once the research is published, how has the experience been in terms of the contact from other people or other stakeholders, in terms of you giving the study having that impact on them, in terms of different schools using them or different research groups using it, in terms of the citations that were made for your paper? How has that experience been? Or now I'm asking that in terms of how GMRG data helps you to be more relevant in terms of the study, and how the study makes an impact post the publication in the research group.
Now you ask about the use of the research and the citations.
Yes.
At this point, at least for me, we have received a few requests from researchers, asking questions about the research to more clarification, or asking about the data analysis or the results. So that comes every now and then. But I guess the most important way of gauging the impact is the citation that we get out of the paper. So we tend to monitor the citations to see how well read or far read the paper has been in the research sphere, and that's the way we actually try to gauge that in terms of what impact the research is making, particularly in the research community.
Right. So also tell us about how is your experience in terms of networking with the different researchers in the GMRG group? How has your interaction been with them? And what do you feel about GMRG research group as a whole for the research community?
Well, obviously, Luis is here with us today. So, I mean, that's one outcome of our GMRG group, that we tend to have a very good bond amongst research, among the GMRG group. And I know that, to me, that's one of the attraction, the research group, and there's been a lot of collaborations that have come out of that. In fact, quite a number of my papers that I've written them in collaboration with, folks from either that I met at the GMRG or I contacted through the GMRG. So in terms of networking, that has really been a big advantage for me in working with the group, and I would say that's why I've stayed with the group as long as I have. That the exchange of ideas, the ability to have your colleague critique your work, provide you some meaningful feedback. Those are all very good points that we get out of the GMRG group.
Perfect. So could you now, Professor Luis could also jump into this one. Could you talk a little bit about the module that you've created for the upcoming annual meeting on supply chain digitization? What is it that you're looking to convey to the group or to the potential incoming data collectors who would want to be part of GMRG, or to the incoming researcher or the corporate people who are coming in? So through your module, what are you how is it that you're kind of planning your module for the upcoming annual meeting?
Well, Luis and I and some other colleagues, but mostly Luis, myself, and I think Evelyn is also another member of the team that we've worked with to work on the GMRG supply chain module. And then we have decided, I guess, made the move to focus on digitalization of the manufacturing processes, because we've seen the impact Industry 4.0 has in the whole business processes economy, and we sense that the digitalization may have a good impact in the way we run different manufacturing processes. And we just wanted to see how that has, evolved, and what could be learned from that to make us better managers or better researchers. So it's the move. I guess Industry 4.0 is something that has come to stay, as we all know it. And we know that there's certainly going to be an impact in terms of the way companies view their competitive strategies. To what extent are they going to incorporate some of these technologies to make them highly more competitive, particularly in this new norm that we have with the COVID-19. I'm sure that the issue of digitalization is going to be even more relevant than it was a year ago, because a lot of companies are moving in that direction. So it'll be interesting to see what impact those technologies would have on the overall competitive dimension of manufacturing practices.
Professor Luis, what do you think about the upcoming module in the annual meeting?
That's a new. I wasn't aware of that meeting, so sorry. No, I would say that the first comment to do it is that during the process of development of the module, it was a long process. I and Ike we had a lot of meetings through Zoom.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes, it was a very interesting process, and the challenge was mainly to capture the impact of digitalization, not only from a manufacturing perspective, but from a perspective of the supply chain. So the module, we have done a lot of work trying to understand how could we capture those impacts. And so we have taken some time to get to the point where we are going to focus on the business process. We will be using the SCORE process as a framework, and we want to assess how does digitalization impact either in production, in manufacturing, in planning, in source, in deliver, and return process. So we are going very thin in the way we want to capture the impact of digitalization in different supply chain processes. And this is, I think the way we have discussed and the way we have proposed to operationalize how we are going to capture that, I think it came with a lot of discussion and with a lot of feedback from colleagues from GMRG. But I think we have come to an end within a proposal that allows us to capture that. And I think it is I would say it is innovative because of that.
That's perfect. So, Professor Ike, what is the word of encouragement that you would give to fellow researchers who want to join GMRG or fellow data collectors who want to join GMRG? What would be your word of encouragement to them, and what value have you seen with your association over these years with GMRG? So just a few words, if you could just give up to the fellow researchers and the data collectors who want to join our community.
Well, I mean, like I mentioned, GMRG is the best group that I've joined, in my professional career. And the reason for that is because of the level of camaraderie and fellowship that we have in that group. So I would invite everyone listening to this to just give it a trial, come to one of the annual meetings now that obviously we wouldn't have that opportunity to do that. In fact, if it wasn't for the COVID, I would have been on my way back from Brazil, coming back from that annual meeting. So my word to whoever is thinking of joining is that this is really a very, very dynamic and very, collaborative, very research-focused group The interesting thing about GMRG is a very fun group, but also it's a highly working group. So they know how to have fun and they know how to work hard, So they're able to combine those two and it works perfectly well. And that's why it's been such a fun to be a member of the GMRG.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Professor Ike. Thank you. Professor Luis, are we ready? I'll take the next section with you.
Mm-hmm.
So you've been fairly new to the entire GMRG group. So tell us about your experience and the research paper that you're involved in with Professor Ike.
Yes, as you know, I've joined recently at GMRG. And the first meeting I attended was the 2016 meeting that occurred a few days before the Roma conference in Trondheim, in Norway. And it was very interesting because I was aware of these groups, these international research network groups, and I made a contact with the colleague who was in charge of GMRG at date. And they welcomed me. They told me, so if you want to appear, you appear. Please, welcome. Come and join us. And this is very important for me because they were very open from the beginning. Okay, so there were no special requirements. The door was open. I was invited to join, to participate in discussion. And it was a pleasant surprise for me because as Ike already mentioned, it was seems to be a very, I would say, very research-focused group. But at the same time, it was a pleasant experience because we had also some social program during the event. So it was the first contact with the group was very interesting, and I think I can say it was in the moment in 2016 the sixth round was starting to be designed. They were starting to think about how the process was going to proceed. There were already some ideas about the organization of the survey. And during these days, I had the opportunity to meet with Ike and other colleagues. And this is how the process starts. Ike was in charge of the supply chain module, and Ike asked it to the group if someone else was willing to collaborate. My research interests are related with supply chain, and at that time, the topic of digitalization was a topic that appeared, and it was already started to be discussed. How can the next survey capture the impact of digitalization? So this is how I start collaboration with the GMRG. It was mainly the first stage, and it has been mainly an experience of interaction, mainly with Ike. We spent many hours discussing many sessions.
Absolutely.
I would say more than 1 year and a half. I would say almost 2-3 weeks meeting, discussing regularly, reading the literature and trying to build a research proposal. And it was a very, I don't say just to say, it was a very, very good experience. For me, it was a very good experience. I have never collected data, so since I joined the group, I don't have the experience of collecting the data. I have experience of collecting data in other research. I've been involved in Portugal, but I think for a researcher as myself, I see two main positive reasons to join the group. One is from a very pragmatic perspective, an opportunity to collect data that later could use to develop my own research. Since I will participating in the data collection process, that's very important to have access to collect and later to have access to the data and trying to get published with that data. But I would say there is another effect that probably for me in the long term, from a long-term perspective, it is even more important. The interaction, the way that research was developed was from the beginning with the highest standard, okay? The interaction I had with Ike, and later with Tom and the other colleagues was always very challenging. So we are always being pushed, being asking, so what, why? There was always a question more to answer.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Why are we going that direction? Either from a theoretical perspective, but also from a methodological perspective. Because from the beginning, and I would like to put this, re-emphasize this, the beginning, Tom, he defined a very high expectations about what we want to do, what we want to achieve with this data collection, and the process was built in the way I think it should be. I've been involved with other groups also, and I've appreciated very much this approach. First, we draw the research model, we'll build on theory, we try to have a very clear idea about what's our research objective, what are our research questions, and we build on that. And this process has been very rich. I'm a little bit younger than Ike, not much, but I would say from the long-term perspective, this has been a very important experience for me, because all these challenging, all these discussions, all the need to challenge myself and to study, to try to answer, try to be aligned with the best practices from a theoretical, from a methodological perspective has been very important for me. And of course, we want to be in conditions to collect data here in Portugal. I'm trying to get involved with other colleagues here in Portugal so that we collaborate with me, trying to build my own team here so that we can bring a large sample, large contribution to the global sample, but also to work and expand my horizons in considering research. And from that perspective has been very rich experience.
Wow, we look forward to having more people from Portugal, sir.
Absolutely.
We definitely do.
Absolutely.
So also, Professor Luis, what is your experience in terms of when the study was done? How was your experience with the corporate? So when your paper is published, did you have any corporate involvement post the paper was published based on the paper and the data?
Look, I would say that some of my research has been using action research. So sometimes the model and the research is conducted already with the collaborations of companies.
Yes.
So I have that experience. Unfortunately, sometimes after doing the project, we get too involved in the publication process, and sometimes we don't give the proper feedback to companies about that. But I have been highly involved in research. But before starting the research, during the research process, giving feedback to companies, yes, sometimes for those that ask for it, but it sometimes is not easy to get, because when you transform the data that you collect in the language that gets published, sometimes it's not easy to back translate. We come to companies again and say, okay, this is how you fit. All these are the conclusions and how they apply to your content. However, in the context of GMRG, it is my challenging that I would like to build a more structured approach, because as Ike already mentioned, the questionnaire is very long. It is required to have different persons from the company answering the questionnaire. So you need a different level of involvement with companies. So you cannot only ask, you have to be ready to deliver later to the companies, to be prepared to give some more extended, more detailed feedback after they fulfill the questionnaire.
So how do you guys see as GMRG becoming the knowledge base for corporate? So I think Professor Ike and Professor Luis both can shed some light on this. How do you see this, can we create a knowledge bank or a knowledge base for companies to approach GMRG, to use different studies that we've done over the years addressing different challenges across manufacturing supply chain? How do you see this happening, and what are your views on this?
Ike, if you allow me, I would start here.
Sure.
I think that we need to do some additional work, on doing some back translation of the results we get, and to draw reports with a language that can be delivered to companies, returned to companies. And I think there is some marketing work that needs to be done regarding.
So on that, I can tell you that what we've started at GMRG is that we pick up one paper a week. Like I do that. I read the paper. I try to read the paper because I'm not from the research field. I try to get the analysis or the tangible results that the corporates could use or the young managers who could use the results. So this initiative is very good. So how do you see the research community supporting this coming out? Because it's very important to create the bridge between the research language being converted to a non-research group, because it's very important to hold their attention, to make sure that what we have studied, what data we have studied, what analysis we've done from the data, what survey results we've got, to communicate those results to the companies. It's very important. So how else do you see that happening? Because it is very important, because today when we are studying as research group, we also want the corporates to take advantage of what we are doing, because at the end of the day, the efforts are just not for us, it's for them as well.
Yeah, if I can come in here. That is a very, very important factor to consider. And that's the reason in the current version of the GMRG, we actually have a group that is looking into that issue. And that is how to report back to companies. As a standard, we want to create a standard template. I believe it's like a benchmarking template where once we analyze the data, we can develop a benchmark. And that benchmark can now be shared with companies. So it becomes more of an active document for them to look at and see how best to manage their companies. So I think the GMRG 6 have taken notice of that important point. And for that reason, they've set aside a group of a team that is going to be developing a template where we'll be able to report back to companies on the results of the study. I think that comes into play in terms of trying to recruit more companies, because once you go to the companies and you tell them that at the end of the study, they will get this benchmark study report that will be sent to them. I think that they can see why they have to commit the time and effort to complete this study. So yeah, that's something that GMRG 6 is actively looking into, and I think would probably be different from the previous GMRG because we've never had that special benchmarking report that we put out of the study. But in this particular version of the GMRG, we will be doing that.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. So Professor Luis, you just mentioned that you would want to get more people to join from your country for the GMRG. It's a wonderful thing. But what is the word of advice or encouragement for others around the world as an experience that you've just gone through as a researcher joining this new community? What is it that you would want to tell others? I mean, apart from the fact that, what Professor Ike Ehie also already emphasized on, anything that you would want to add from what is already said to invite more potential researchers and data collectors to make this group a bigger, more dedicated, having an impact on supply chain industry group?
I think I made a good point about the reasons to join the group. It is important, of course, if we have more people participating in the data collection process, probably we would have also fresher perspectives about the analysis of the data and the new perspectives about how to extract knowledge from that data. And I think that's because, of course, we start with a clear idea about the objectives, but I can imagine that a fresh look to the models and to the data can be very positive. And of course, if we increase the size of the sample and more answers from different geographies, that would give us some opportunity to compare different institutional, different economic contexts. And I think that would make the conclusions much more richer than they can be if we just limit the sample to a small number of countries. I think it is very important to have the opportunity to compare and to do that benchmark that Ike was mentioned. Look, for example, if you consider Portugal, we are a small country with many small and medium companies. And of course, we cannot expect to compare results with companies from the States, for example. So if we want to expand or do some benchmarking. It could be very interesting to have results from more small countries. From small and medium companies from other countries. And I think that would make the conclusions more richer and more reasonable.
Perfect, perfect. I thank you both for your time today. If there are any follow-up questions that I feel after post this interview, I may send them to you through the email, and you could just let me know through the email. But thank you for your insights, your inputs. Thank you for your service, basically, to GMRG. I would say that making it such a successful group. It's because dedicated people like you guys that who make GMRG a success today. Thank you so much for being there with GMRG, and thank you for your time today.